Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. My friend and colleague Doug Muzzio is a professor of public affairs at Baruch College, noted for his knowledge of American public opinion, voting behavior, and city politics. He's also the host of City Talk and definitely what we call a political junkie. Are you still a political junkie in this exciting year?
I mainline every day. It's just the best. I can't fathom the end of this campaign when I have to crash.
You're really still watching, though.
It's addictive, except the latest Patterson Spitzer.
Now we're in the state.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sexual peccadillo overloaded. I don't think I can believe it. And the presidential race is just fascinating, except it's I'm starting to get edgy. They're starting to get at each other, and it looks like they could tear each other apart.
It's gotten to be, I watched everything for a while.
Please.
Everything. But now I really can't stand it. I can't stand listening to all these pundits who I don't know who they are. I mean, it's just crazy to listen to their opinions, and sometimes they're so off. I'm tired of it but they say them because they have nothing else to say, and they got the time, right?
Please, I do it. I get tired of hearing
and here
myself
we are
thought.
talking about it.
Again,
right.
We're talking about it and being bored with us talking about it.
But don't you think how are we going to change the system next time?
I don't know if we ever change it because, there's no one person or group of people who can change it. What would make much more sense is to have a set of regional or certain types of primaries, 4 of them, 5 of them, or 6 of them, and rotate them every election cycle so you don't have the kind of crazy situation we had this year.
So could the Democratic National Committee do that on its own, or is that legislative?
No, it's a combination of the parties, the legislatures,
everything.
The congressional delegations. It's really very complicated.
But what they could do is move the convention up earlier.
They could have
a June convention.
Well, except now but then we'd have the first primary in October of the year before.
Well, this is too long, isn't it? It's too spread out.
It is. You need somehow to limit the length of the campaign because I think there's a certain fatigue that comes in with it, and it's really an irrational process. No sane person would develop, and no sane organization would develop what we developed.
There's something really different, it seems to me, about this camp. Maybe it started 4 years ago. With this expression, swift boating and Kerry and the lying and stuff. But the campaign is so long. There's so much cable television time devoted to it. It's not the networks, but now we've become addicted to the cable station.
Well, and there's the internet, which is 24-hour. And
so it's constant. It's constant repeating things that happened, or it's constant attention to mistakes or to bad things.
Right.
And then it's just conjecture, right?
Right.
And that plays into our feelings about this race.
Right, and not only feelings about the race, but the feeling about politics in general. Yeah. It's that, the feeling, again, going back to the state, that they all do it, that they're all corrupt, that they all lie to us. I try to, have my students have an honest skepticism, but not be cynical. It's tough not to be cynical when you've got, the former governor of New York State spying on the enemy, paying prostitutes money, moving money around, and then the new governor comes in and he's got sexual peccadillos and drug use and God knows what else, and we have Joe Bruno maybe getting indicted. It's just, it's fascinating as far as human drama, but
who wants to know?
I don't want to know. Don't tell me about your sex life anymore. Just do what you have to do.
We'll come back. I want to talk about the state. We'll come back to the federal government because there's a lot I want to talk about.
Sure.
But the beginning of this presidential election, everybody in the state thought that Hillary Clinton was going to get elected.
Absolutely. And they were talking about Hillary, Rudy, and Mike Bloomberg, the trifecta.
But then the question became of the people in the state, who's going to run for Hillary's Senate seat?
Who's going to get appointed? And then, they were all job hunting.
So now, what are they switching? Do they think that Patterson's going to stay for the rest of the time?
Who knows? Who knows? My bet would be that he stays. But if you've got, if he's got a closet full of shoes that are about to drop, who knows?
Right. But the other interesting thing is, this is the first time that we're almost at the end of the budget process. It went very smoothly. With the cuts and everything, we never hear about the budget.
No,
it's been hidden.
Yeah, right. And that's what they wanted us to do. They wanted us to be, they're spending $124 billion of New Yorkers' money. what is it going for? What special interest are getting what? There's no transparency here, so we don't know who's in the till.
Do you think now that we've gotten so much more participation in the political process, the interest in the presidential election, that New York State politics may change a little bit?
I think that the internet and YouTube and text messaging, this whole new form of social networking, really will not only have profound effects on politics but on society, and we haven't seen the full impact of this. Yeah, I think the times they are changing, and in fact, some of that change is driven by technology. But you've got this law of political thermodynamics. Things stay the same unless they're confronted by something that's going to change it.
But the Democratic Party in this state, the Republican Party is just, what is it? It's the conservative party, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. There is a Republican Party. It's shrinking vis-a-vis Democrats. They're likely to lose control of the Senate within the next 2 election cycles.
Do you think that's still going to happen?
I don't know if it happens in this election cycle. Certainly, they only need 2 seats. Well, now they with Bruno casting the tying vote because of the state constitution. I don't know if Patterson's going to make the push that Spitzer might have to overturn the status quo, because he's much more the inside. We don't know an awful lot about David Patterson.
Who becomes the if they do win a majority? I guess it's the same.
What?
In the state Senate, then what happens? The majority leader still becomes
So
it becomes a Democrat instead of Bruno.
Exactly.
But what I'm interested in is the control of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party in New York State, at least in New York City, is nothing. I don't see it.
Well, the party
Yet they're the superdelegates.
Right.
Now, how do you ever affect that? You can run a campaign that you get much more public interest and attention and participation, but you're still not affecting that inside political party power.
Well, that's true to an extent, but don't forget, it is only 20% of the total number of delegates, the superdelegates.
This National Committee, but who represents us in the Democratic National Committee? Who voted for this crazy system?
Oh,
I don't know. I haven't got the faintest idea.
Well, it's a combination of state practices, party practices. The fact that you've got the party nominee being chosen in some states by only Democrats, some by independents and Democrats, some by Republicans, Democrats, and independents. It's sort of a crazy structure. What is this thing called the parties and the nomination process?
And it's certainly dulling a little bit.
Well, after
maybe
a while,
not.
After a while, this big hiatus between the last batch and Pennsylvania, you've got this huge dead space where you can only get yourself into trouble, either make a mistake or go on the attack. It's not good for the Dems to have this continue to the end and have it vitriolic. If they can go through it and come out strong, which is possible. I think Obama was right when he said that she shouldn't drop out, because in a sense, it makes him better at the end. But there comes a point where, too much sparring in the drain in the
your
gym.
Conduct during the campaign.
Right, exposes your weaknesses.
Right.
Yep.
But I don't think that the fighting within the party necessarily affects the general election. I don't really buy that. I think that once there's a general election, the debate is different with...
It is, but I could see
it's
where...
It's disaffecting, you think?
Yeah, I think that I could see where some Obama supporters looking at this, particularly the young who have never participated, look at the process and say, it is dirty. We can't do it. We tried. It didn't happen. You become disaffected.
But the poll that they took about who would not vote for the nominee if the opponent won showed more Clinton supporters dropping out. Now, what does that mean? Those are...
I don't know exactly who they are. I should have, looked at the poll numbers, but I would guess that they're more traditional, white, downscale, Reagan-type Democrats. I don't know. I don't know.
What is this blue-collar labeling? I know that there's a working class. I know that. But do you really think that you can just say that's the general public, and then use the intellectuals or the latte group that they talk about as a segment? I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
It's far more complicated.
It's so crazy.
It's far more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, clearly there are ways that one can look at data, whether it's polling data, expenditure data, mortgages, do you drink a latte, do you own an SUV? You can put together a profile of people that give you a pretty accurate idea of how they might vote in an election, what appeals they may respond to. I mean, this marketing is fairly successful. I mean, the Republicans did it in 2004. Mike Bloomberg did it in the 2005 mayoral race. He put together these databases that are really extensive and tell a lot about you that you're not even aware that they know.
So is it that most of the younger voters are supporting Obama?
Well, I mean, the classic breakdown in the data, you know, Obama supporters are younger, with less previous history, more educated, more upscale, socioeconomic status. You know, Hillary more downscale, more blue collar, more women. So yes, certainly Obama with blacks, Latinos with Clinton. So over the course of the season so far, you've seen some fairly definite trends.
So do you think we're in a transition period? I mean, I read in the paper today that the college is accepting students, that there are more applications than ever before because college is now, even though it's very expensive, more loans available, more people going to college are going to be college educated, right?
Okay.
So is that going to be a sign that we're changing?
I don't know. I mean, does college education necessarily lead you in certain ideological directions?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
The conservatives would argue that we're all, you know, liberal proselytizers who want to make everybody, you know, socialist. It's certainly not true. Again, it's, you know, a complex array of factors that are involved. But I think the higher the socioeconomic status, at least in this election, the more prone people seem to be voting for Obama, at least Democrats.
Is there still a gender gap, or is it now an age gender gap?
Well, it's much more complicated. There's issues of gender, there's issues of race, sort of the traditional breakdowns, but I think also there's a real generational split here. Between Obama and Hillary on one hand, and if Obama is the presidential candidate, Obama certainly and John McCain. It's generational in many senses. It's generational in terms of their socialization, their use of the internet, the way they communicate, the way they commune with one another. It's different.
But it's older women, isn't it? Out of the women's vote in the gender gap, Hillary appeals to older women.
Yes. Again, you know,
this can that be interpreted as an indication of the women's movement and that younger women have become they don't need to separate the issues out as much?
I mean, that's a plausible explanation. I don't know whether, I mean, I could document it with data from surveys, but that's certainly impressionistically correct. That you know, in a sense, the movement succeeded. And its success now has bred sort of a comfort with whatever the status quo is, and a lack of realization of the importance of the fight and the necessity to keep fighting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, it is
interesting. A lot of the real philosophical feminists, early feminists, are the strongest for Hillary.
Right. They see it much more in terms of gender. I mean, clearly you've got gender issues, race issues, generational issues. It's good.
So our attitudes over the long history of race, they've changed quite a lot?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the polling numbers, there is dramatic cultural and attitudinal change in the United States, at least what people are telling their survey researchers. If you look at just the society today in terms of race and gender, and you look at it, let's say even 30 years ago, very different. You look at who's holding positions of influence in universities and foundations and corporations. A huge number of women, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and others that you wouldn't even dreamed of 30 years ago. So on that level, both in reality and in people's attitudes, I think you've had a definite, if you will, liberalization of opinion. That's not to say that there isn't, institutional racism and personal racism out there by blacks, by whites, by others. It's there, and some of it is institutional, but it's better.
And in the census figures, there are more households that are mixed ethnically
yes,
and racially?
But you know, the pot is causing some melting. It's not simply a salad. You know, there is some melting. I think Time Magazine several years ago did sort of the composite American by putting together the various facial features of who we are, and it ain't the Caucasian face of the 19th century. It's
you
not.
can even tell it by looking at advertising on television.
Oh yeah,
it's very striking.
Oh yeah, I grew up when there were no blacks on television
and no women, and no women.
Right.
I remember going to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, complaining about the lack of women.
Yeah, no, I mean certainly race and then gender. I mean sexual preference. I mean
the whole thing is
different.
Very different.
Which makes, you know, the base of the Republican Party not very happy.
Yeah. You know what else I've noticed that's different, I think, is the role of a spouse in this campaign. Well, first of all, it started because the former president is a spouse, right?
Right.
As my husband would say, and he's out of the house. But then you have the discussion recently of John Edwards and his wife and her opinions.
Right.
It is astonishing to me
that
you read this.
Well, Michelle Obama, too.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
more
Absolutely.
and more women of professional men and men of women, even though less frequent, they're having an influence. And certainly having Bill Clinton as, you know, the first spouse or the spouse of a presidential campaigner is unique in American history.
So you think the future elections are going to show this is going to have an impact on them?
I think that, you know, more and more you're looking at this as a team, and part of it may be simply, you know, what you were talking about before. You've got to fill a 24-hour news hall.
Right.
If you can't talk about the candidate, talk about the candidate's wife and kids.
And what do you think of this discussion with the rules with Florida and Michigan?
You know, the rules were the rules. You got to stick with the rules. I know it's it's an Obama position, but I don't see any other way to do it other than to do it that way. They will come up with something that I haven't thought of.
They came up with Mississippi in 1964, right?
But you're back to that. You're potentially back to that era. And Clinton says she's going to go all the way, and he's going to go all the way, and they have no incentive. They have no incentive not to go all the way, either of the two of them.
Except how they come out.
Well, I mean, you know, the question is, you know, I want to win, he wants to win, or she wants to win, and I'm not going to back off, and I'm close or I'm ahead. I don't understand who cracks their heads together and says this is what's going to happen.
How did you get to be interested in all of this? How did you get to be a professor of?
Oh God, it's
public affairs.
It's one of these.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Queens. I grew up in Woodhaven, Queens. I went to public school for the first 4 years, parochial school for 4 years, high school, college, all in the city. I sat next to my wife in the 5th grade. As a matter of fact, I kissed my wife in the 5th grade.
That's good.
And then I went to graduate school. I went to college.
Was your family interested in politics and government?
What hooked me was 1960 debate at St. Thomas the Apostle between the J.F. Kennedy people and the Richard Nixon people. And I was on the Richard Nixon side. I was appointed to be on the Richard Nixon side. And that got me hooked on politics.
Did you believe in him?
I'm an 8th grader. I believe what I read.
Were your parents Republicans or Democrats?
But they were
Did
both.
Did they talk about it?
They were both. And in fact, during the Eisenhower elections, the 2 Eisenhower-Stevenson elections, they voted Republican. My father served in the armed forces under Eisenhower in Europe and voted for Eisenhower. I went to college. I remember the first day I'm in college, I'm with my roommate in September '65. It's the New York Times. And I turned to him and I said, Jimmy, what do you think about this Vietnam stuff? And I went through 4 years of college during the height of both the burning of the cities and the rioting, got my BA, went to NYU, got my master's and my PhD. I was an international relations specialist. I almost worked for the State Department.
So what did you think of Vietnam?
Oh, it was a huge mistake. It was a mistake conceptually, and it was a mistake operationally.
And you thought that in 1965?
You know what? No, I didn't know it in 65. It was a later revelation to me. I guess it was 66, 67 when it became more and more obvious. I was much less aware, as an 18-year-old in 1965. And then what turned me into politics was I was a public school teacher. I got laid off in the first wave of the fiscal crisis. I was unemployed. I couldn't get hired. I was overqualified. I saw in the Times that Fred Harris, the senator from Oklahoma,
I just saw him on television the other day.
He's a college professor. He's a political scientist. Was opening a campaign office. I signed up, worked in the Fred Harris campaign, went to New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, met Tony Olivieri, who was a former assemblyman, became a city councilman. I became his chief of staff, and then I became a New York City person.
And that was it?
That started it.
So, but you were in partisan politics now.
Yeah,
Now, do you have to be objective?
I try to, as much as possible, to be objective and neutral, but you can't help it. So, when I talk to reporters, depending on who the reporter is and how well I know them, the story goes in different ways. But I try to be as open as possible, but you can't be objective.
There isn't any such thing, is there?
But what I do is I don't contribute to political candidates, and I really don't go to fundraisers and that type of thing to give me some distance from them. But at the same time, I count many of them as friends.
And you don't fudge figures.
No, I try to be as straightforward as possible, and with a little bit of edge. I'm from Brooklyn, so come on, don't BS me.
I thought you were from Queens.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in Queens. But it's the Brooklyn attitude.
All right.
Listen to my accent.
I can, but how long is that going to stay with you?
Until I'm dead. Forever. What are you kidding me? I'm this old. I'm going to lose my accent.
So, what do you think is going to happen in this campaign? You have no idea.
It's one of these. William Goldman, the screenwriter and novelist, says nobody knows nothing. How many times have we been shown to be wrong? If I had to bet, if you put a gun to my head and said, bet Obama wins the nomination, Hillary isn't the VP, and it's a much closer election than one would have thought, but Obama wins? Is that what you wanted to hear?
Yeah.
Your face lit up. Tell them what they want to hear.
Let's see, you brought up the question of the ticket, and that's an interesting question. How can serious political figures seriously propose?
No, they can't.
How can they?
I don't know. I don't know. Mario Cuomo just did this piece, very thoughtful piece. Right. It was picked up. I don't see it. I don't see how. Number one, how Obama agrees to be the VP with Hillary, because, you already got the co-president. Right. What is the vice president going to do? And does Hillary want, and does Bill want to be vice president? I don't think so.
And does Obama want Hillary?
Does Obama want Hillary? There are 25% of the people in the United States say they won't vote for a woman, and 25% say they won't vote for a black. There's some overlap. But at the minimum, you got 30 to 35% of negatives all in one candidacy.
You know what fascinates me in this discussion, and I guess it's the cable discussion, is the personality traits that people talk about and just take for granted. They'll say, I've heard people say, you want Hillary and Bill Clinton as a vice president, they'll stab you in the back. How can you say that about candidates for president and vice?
It's easy. Watch. It happens all the time. This is part of the discourse.
You don't hear that kind of discussion about Obama, though.
No. Well, it's a different perspective. There is an element of Clinton fatigue. Certainly we're tired of George Bush, but there's an element of Clinton fatigue.
Even people who are not fatigued are so honest about them. You can never tell what the Clintons are going to do. How can we say this? Because you can never tell what they're going to pull out of the hat next.
Right.
It's so interesting to me because
and it's denigrating.
It doesn't elevate. They're not elevated anymore. They're on the same level we are.
But they shouldn't be elevated.
I guess not. Do you want to humanize so much the office of the president?
Well, see, that's the thing. How much of demythologizing becomes dehumanizing? But we don't like kings. We don't like emperors. We pull down the statues.
I still can't admit that I think that George Bush is as dumb as he appears to be. I keep thinking I'm wrong.
I'm not going to comment.
It's because I want them to know more than I know. I want them to be smarter than I am.
Ronnie.
Yes.
Forget it.
It's so
With some of them,
shocking to me. I mean, I used to watch Meet the Press and thought that the people being interviewed knew everything off the hat. That, you know, you asked them.
Well,
That's
if you're
how naive I was.
come on.
But we needed naivety to make the government in a funny way. In a funny way, we need it, and in a funny way, it's a disaster.
Right. The mythology is comfortable, and that narrative is a more appealing narrative.
Yeah.
But it ain't the true story.
It's like the Queen of England, right? The royal family. Yeah. So who do you think's going to run for governor? I like that question.
You should run for governor.
Right.
Come on. Who the hell knows? I mean, it's early. We don't know how Patterson's going to do. He's totally untried. We don't know if there are further allegations out there. We don't know if Joe Bruno's going to get indicted. We don't know all of those things.
But we do see Andrew Cuomo sitting up there.
Well, Andrew Cuomo's
doing
there.
very well.
Extraordinarily well. You know, absolutely confounded his enemies and his friends. He's sitting there. You've got Tom Suozzi, who was
I remember
an
that.
extraordinarily qualified candidate in the last election.
I voted for him.
Well, I mean, well, wait a second. You should go into the bumper sticker business with me. Don't blame me, I voted for Suozzi, or don't blame me, I voted for Faso.
Right, or don't blame me, I voted for Kerry. Right.
Right, one of those deals. But I mean, you know, you've got Tom Suozzi out there, you've got Andrew Cuomo out there. I mean, you've got you know, elected officials both in the Senate and the Assembly that are plausible gubernatorial candidates. So you've got no lack of people wanting the job.
Well, we'll come back and follow that, because now we're at the end of the time. I hope we've been more interesting than some of the people I was complaining about, but I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Ask the viewers.
Thank you, Doug. It was really fun.
Thank you.
Is there any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore? Please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.